Howdy folks, Justin here. Welcome to our Houses of Morrowind set review. Let's go. We're starting with blue. Ghost Gate Defender is our very first card here. It's a 1/3 guard for 1. We've seen 1/3 guards for 1 before, and they didn't see play despite the fact I think that they're really strong cards. This one also has Exalt 3, so you pay 4 for this guy, you get a 1/3 guard that deals 2 damage to a creature. Is this card good? This card is very powerful. I don't know that it's good enough to see play, which is interesting, right? Because this card would be really good at certain things, like fighting against a goblin deck, for instance, like an all-in green deck, where you could potentially get a 2-for-1 off of it, or get value off it on turn 1 as well. However, I'm concerned that the number of matchups where it's not playable far outweighs the number of matches where it is playable. It is noteworthy for being a cheap creature, the cheapest creature with Exalt. So if you're looking for a cheap way to trigger Exalt, you could turn to Ghost Gate Defender. For the other Exalt Matters cards, it's worth experimenting with. In certain metas, it's going to be great. It might be good in a tournament deck where you can bring out the deck that it's in against certain types of decks. I'm nebulous about it being the kind of card you can safely include in the ladder all the time, though. Sixth House Amulet's new item, 1 magicka for +1/+1, and if the wielder has 5 or more power, it gains ward. That's the House Dagoth mechanic, 5 powers matters. I kind of like this card. It's weaker than Steel. It as a 1 magicka equipment, you're going to want to compare it to stuff like Steel Scimitar. The Steel Scimitar, this is not. However, its ability to disrupt combat math later on is pretty valuable. I'm not necessarily sold on this card, even as an inclusion in like one of the Gardener Swords based items decks, but it's worth taking into consideration whenever you're putting that deck together. Barazil's Tinkering Betray, 2 magicka, transform a creature into a random creature that costs 1 more. So this is a pseudo silence effect for your opponent's creatures, although you could roll into something much worse for them. This is interesting in a Last Gasp deck. I don't know that this card's constructed playable. I think its only consistent constructed application will be removing a guard from a lane from your opponent, which is something that blue can't always do on its own. I'm not super keen on the randomly generating, as far as competitive decks go. Really keen on this card's usefulness on your own creatures. That said, I'm gonna play with it, and I think it's fun. But yeah. Falling Wizard, 5 magicka. I'm sorry, 5/5 for 2 magicka. This is the cheapest, one of the 2 cheapest 5 power creatures you can get for House Dagoth synergies. Summon, Falling Wizard deals 5 damage to himself, so he kills himself. Last Gasp, put an experimental scroll in your hand. The experimental scrolls are give each friendly creature 2 random keywords, do 5 damage to each player, and do 2 damage to each creature, I think are the experimental scrolls. Anyway, if you have like an East Empire Crafter, a Bruma Armorer, or a Divine Fervor on the board, your Falling Wizard will survive. That said, it's kind of just a gag card. The stat line is high enough, right, that like if you can consistently keep this guy alive and do something stupid with him, then it might be constructed viable. We don't, at this point, I haven't built that deck. I've seen people play with this card. Yeah, East Empire Crafter is probably the most frustrating thing that could happen, putting out a 6/1 guard that gives you an experimental scroll. But experimental scrolls aren't that valuable. If you're going to be abusing this guy, go hard and use it to trigger the Dagoth synergies. But none of the Dagoth synergies are so strong as to make me want to run Falling Wizard, to be honest with you. Mage's Guild Recruit. I've seen a lot of people go back and forth in this card. I'm in the camp that says this card is really, really, really strong. Sometimes there are matches that you are going to win if you have a turn 6 Dawn's Wrath that you would have lost otherwise. This enables that turn 6 Dawn's Wrath, or turn 4 Ice Storm, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes there are some decks out there that just get in under the point where those mass removal options are viable. So yeah, in those decks, I like Mage's Guild Recruit. I don't think you mind dropping it down 1/2. I think that in a lot of control decks, this is going to be better than Daggerfall Mage, which I know is sacrilegious, but I said that last week when the card was revealed for the first time. Art's beautiful, card's strong. Not an auto include even in a control mage deck, right? But still a card that you need to take into consideration when building anything. Control with blue. Poetic Armiger is a 2/3 for 2, exalt 1, gain a random keyword. Well, okay, first of all, I love this card in Arena, but I actually think this card is not terrible for constructed as well. 2/3 for 2 is a fine stat line if you are if you're looking for something like that on turn 2. And playing 3 Magicka for a 2/3 with Rally or a 2/3 with Drain, with Lethal, with Ward isn't unreasonable either. Regenerate sucks. Guard might not be what you're looking for. Um, Breakthrough, probably not really useful. That's the price you pay when you include cards like this in your deck. It has the potential, however, to be really good, and enough of the keywords are net positive that I think it's worth considering. Saidenid Courier is a 0/1 for 2 that summons, when you summon it, equips a 3/0, a +3/+0 steel sword to a friendly creature. I kind of like this. It is fuel for altars. It beefs up a creature early so that you can trigger your House Dagoth synergies. It might be useful in some sort of really aggressive blue deck that has follow-up items for this, or is running, say, Corsair Ship. It's not a bad card. It's not an auto-include. It's not even a good card. But it is something that will probably be seen on the ladder, just not in Tier 1 decks. I do like it, though, I will say that. Temple Courier, this is a beautiful card. It's 2 Magicka 2/2. Exalt 4, summon a 5/3 Flame Atronach with Breakthrough. So whenever you're looking at these Exalt creatures, you need to take into consideration what they do when you are playing them with Temple Patriarch, which is a 5/5 for 7 that when on summon triggers the Exalt of each friendly creature. This is one of the biggest payoffs you can get for that, and is worth taking a look at just for that. 2/2 for 2 is fine. I mean, it's not great. 6 Magicka for 7/5 worth of stats on board is not bad either. In blue, it's pretty good. It's tough to say, right? Because the deck that wants the 6 Magicka 2/2 and 5/5 isn't necessarily the same deck that wants a 2 Magicka 2/2. So do you play this on turn 2 ever in that deck? If not, do you have better things to do with your time? I think Temple Conjurer is worth a look. The fact that it synergizes, it has such a powerful Exalt ability, makes that 7 Magicka 5/5 in Tribunal Temple really interesting to look at, and that's where I would expect to see this card see play. It's also worth noting that, if you're looking for a way to fill a control deck with things that you can trade with early, but still have some sort of impact in the late game, so you're not top decking this in a control majors, control spell sword matchup on turn 10, and you're like, well, I have a 2/2 for 2. I mean, this does present a threat to the board that probably needs to be answered by your opponent. So Temple Conjurer is a pretty good card in some circumstances. It's never awful, thanks to its exaltability. You got to play with this card, I think. But I can see this card seeing some serious constructed play, to be honest with you. Burning Touch, Prophecy, 3 Magicka, deal 2 damage to a creature. First of all, as far as philosophically go, I like this sort of card as a Prophecy, a removal spell. I don't know. It's. I'm glad this card exists because I like that this is the direction they took Prophecy within this set. That said, I don't think this card is good enough to see play unless you're running a control deck that has an interest in playing cheaper spells, like one that's running Shrine to Namira. If that is the deck that you're running, Burning Touch might be worth looking at. Yeah. Expect this card to randomly blow you out in the early game when it gets hit off Prophecy, but don't expect it in every deck that can run it. Clockwork City Pilgrim, 3/3 for 3, totally fine stat line. Brotherhood Slayer is frequently just a 3/3 for 3. With Guard, and Exalt Exalt 3 +2/+2. So for 6 Magicka you can get a 5 guard, and for 3 Magicka you get a 3/3 guard. This card I think is good enough to see play in some control decks, maybe even some mid-range decks. I like the 3/3 guard for 3 in blue, right? Before for your 3/3 for your 3 cost guard slot in blue, you were looking at the Prophecy 2 4 pirate guy. And I think a 3/3 is probably better for trading. It can usually trade and survive with most 2 drops, not all, but with most 2 drops. And yeah, the Exalt ability gives it some power in late game too. Like all Exalt creatures, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's pretty good. Speaking of Exalt creatures for 3, we have Enamorous Keeper, this stunning card. It's a 4/3 for 3, it's a legendary card. And Exalt 5, equip an Heirloom Greatsword to Enamorous Keeper. Heirloom Greatsword is a card that I throw in a lot of decks. It's +5/+0 for 6 Magicka that has Last Gasp, return it to your hand. You usually would need, you run 1 copy in decks that could make use of it. Enamorous Keeper, you know, for 8 Magicka, you get a 9/3. That's not terrible. It's never a dead draw, as far as the late game goes. It has to be answered, although it has 3 toughness and it's going to be easy to kill. I've played a lot with Enamorous Keeper on the test servers, and it has been pretty good, I have to say. I like it in Assassin, in the sorts of decks that I would run an Heirloom Greatsword in anyway. I think I'd rather run an Enamorous Keeper because I don't want Heirloom Greatsword sitting in my hand on turn 2 or 3 when I could play a 4/3. I think the card is pretty strong, and I think it's going to see constructed play. Vigilant Ancestor. This card is really good. That's bottom line. It's a 3 Magicka 5/4 with guard. It's permanently shackled. So, yeah, I mean, you could silence it if you feel like you need to do that sort of thing, but it's just a 5/4 guard that doesn't attack. It costs 3 Magicka. This card is pretty good at halting early aggression, stopping your opponent's, Goblin Skulks and stuff like that. I think it's real strong, and I think it's definitely going to see play in a variety of decks. Wild Clumsiness, I don't have a lot to say about this card. 3 Magicka Shackle a random enemy creature in each lane with Betray. This card is not particularly good. The types of decks that have creatures they want to throw away to make a sort of tempo play like this aren't the types of decks that would take advantage of shackling creatures in your opponent's lanes for an early tempo play like this aren't the kinds of decks that can sacrifice creatures to do that on turn 3, 4, whatever. Um, Maybe it's good in Arena, but I'm not very impressed with this card. Hatchery Meddler, 5/3 for 4. Summon, swap a creature's power and health. It can target itself to make itself a 3/5 if that's what you're into. This is pretty good with some of the Dagoth stuff. I mean, it does trigger the 5 power matter stuff. It is good at screwing up combat math in all sorts of interesting ways. It randomly kills Portcullis. The question is, like, what deck would I ever run this in the main deck over any number of other cards that I could run in that spot? Kind of depends what your strategy is. As kind of a spoiler card that your opponent's not going to see coming, it has some pretty strong value there. I mean, an immense amount of value, actually. In a deck that is interesting, I mean, like, okay, the synergy with the 3/7 for 6 green Sabertooth Cat thing that it can attack twice every turn. You could hit your opponent for 14 with that. It could be a backup plan in a House Telvanni Ring of Imaginary Might deck. It's not a great card. It is a powerful card, and it will see some niche play. This is a very niche card. It's not a mainstay, but I like it. Tribunal Oathsman's a 4 Magicka 3/3 with Summon. If you have a yellow card in play, you gain 4 health, and if you have a purple card in play, you gain +1 max Magicka. This card's real strong. That's the bottom line. I think you'll play it in your Tribunal Temple control decks of a certain kind, not all of them, but card's good. The ramp is interesting. We're being told that with this card, that ramp is something we should look at. Additional ramp in-house in Tribunal Temple, and I think that all of these cards, these dual attribute, tri-attribute bonus cards, whatever you want to call them, are pretty strong. Ash Piercer. This card was revealed already once. A couple weeks ago, it's 5 magic 3/4, deal 3 damage to a creature if you have a creature with 5 or more power. I don't like this card. That is my opinion of it. I don't think it's very good, and I don't think it'll see constructed play. It's probably alright in Arena, but not great even there. Thorana is a 3/8 for 5. It says, after you play an action, shuffle 3 0-cost copies of that action into your deck. Alright, well. So, there are a couple combos with this involving Goblin Skulk. Archer's Gambit in a House Dagoth deck and Swift Strike in just an Assassin deck allow you to do infinite damage to your opponent. I tested this out on the test servers. I timed it, and from 30 life, I could not kill my opponent with the infinite Swift Strikes that it would be necessary to, take my opponent down in the amount of time it took me to set it all up. On turn 8, if you have Thorana and Swift Strike in hand and a Goblin, all you need is a Goblin Skulk on the board to go off. So, and on turn 8, Goblin Skulk's a lot less intimidating than it is in the early game. So it's not like a terribly difficult combo to pull off, but it's not exactly viable because of the time problem. Um, yeah. So any deck that you would try to kill your opponent with that combo, you would need to poke them already to get them down there. So my best, as far as the combo goes, my thoughts are throw Thorana, a couple copies of Swift Strike, and some Goblin Skulks in a deck that would already run those cards except for Swift Strike. And then randomly, once in a while, you'll get to go infinite. That said, there are a lot of other applications here, right? Like shuffling Lightning Bolts into your deck, or shuffling Journey to Sovngards into your deck, or shuffling in Siege of Stros Makai. I mean, the possibilities are endless here. I do think it's a fun card. I think it's pretty strong. 3-8 for 5 is totally... It's going to be difficult for your opponent to kill when you play it. Let's put it like that. I like this card. I don't think it's broken, but I think it's super powerful. Genius Pathmage, 6 Magicka 4/4 legendary card. Summon a random creature from your deck with cost equal to your current Magicka. Not max Magicka, but the current Magicka you have left. So, a couple things you can do with this. Obviously, super strong coming off an altar. If your only 6-drop, if your altar is ready to summon a 6-drop, and this is the only 6-drop in your deck, you will summon 3 of them, which is, of course, pretty powerful. On turn 7 in an altar deck, if you haven't played your Ungolem yet, this summons Ungolem, and if you have, this summons a Brotherhood Assassin, also strong. This requires like an altar-like list of creatures and what they cost in order to maximize the efficient use of. And it is a 6 Magicka 4/4 that on turn 6 isn't going to do anything besides play itself. So it's not broken. It's not even good necessarily. It is strong in certain circumstances. It belongs in a couple specific decks, which is kind of cool for a legendary card, right? Like you're not crafting these unless you're specifically building a couple different types of decks. But I like it in those decks. I think there are probably other things you might want to be doing on turn 6, or not on turn 6, but with 6 Magicka in those decks. But that said, I think that pulling out 3 Genius Path Mages with an altar on 6 is something we all need to do sometime in our lives. I don't expect this to be a constructed mainstay or anything, though. Lame Corpus basically describes itself in its name. Tel Voss Magister, 6 Magicka 5/4 with Ward. At the end of your turn, you gain a Ward. That is super strong. That's all there is really to say. This is a very powerful card. Really powerful card. It's not in every deck, but it's going to be in enough decks that you're going to think about this card all the time when facing against any kind of deck that could run it. That's basically it. It's just real powerful. It's the first time we've ever got Ward. There's new animation for it. It's real cool. This card will see constructed play. I've already seen it a number of times. I've played it a number of times. It's good. Expect this card in your future. Be prepared to answer it. Mighty Conjuring, 7 Magicka action. Summon a random Atronach. If you have a creature with 5 or more power, summon a Lava Atronach instead. A Lava Atronach is an 8/8 with Breakthrough Guard and Ward. So, yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think that you should try this out every time you run a Dagoth deck. It's a very specific card. The other applications for this are in like Ramp Sorcerer or Ramp Telvanni, where you're going to be able to play this a little bit early and probably have a 5-power creature on the board. House Dagoth is, of course, the place to play it because you have all those synergies with 5-power creatures. But Sandra just brought me waffles. Thank you very much, honey. This is a really strong card. I like this card a lot. The art's beautiful, and I expect to see this seeing some play. But not every deck that could play it will play it. But it is powerful. Spirit Knife. This is a card that I've seen a lot more on the test servers than I ever anticipated I would see. It's 7 Magicka, deals 7 damage to a creature. Whatever. It's the draw a card thing that I think that pushes this into conceivably playable. The fact that this does nothing for your control plan in the early game is rough. In a meta full of control mirrors, this card is king, obviously, right? Because it kills a lot of stuff, almost everything. and it draws you a card. So it really depends what you're planning on facing against and what your deck's weaknesses are, whether you can afford to play this card in the first place, and whether or not you're going to benefit from it. That said, it's a really powerful card. We would like if Piercing Javelin costs 7 and it drew your card, would you run it? Maybe, in the right circumstances. That's how I feel about Spirit Knife. Traitor Slames, 7 Magic of Betray, deal 2 damage to all enemy creatures in a lane, so you can cast it twice if you sacrifice a creature to do 4 damage to all enemy creatures in a lane. At 7 Magicka, I don't particularly like this card. There are going to be times when this card blows everybody out on the ladder because somebody's running it in an effective way. That said, I don't think this card is particularly strong, and I think that most of the time you're going to be able to do something else more effectively with that Magicka. Thorana's Lawman. It's an 8 Magicka 5/5 Guard and Ward. So at 8 Magicka, that's probably what you should pay for a 5/5 with Guard and Ward. That said, I find it difficult to imagine a world where I want to be doing this. That's really all I have to say about that. Finally, we have Sothasil, 4/4 for 9 Magicka with Exalt 3 +4/+4. So for 12 Magicka, you get an 8/8. It says at the end of your turn, if you have an Exalted creature in play, summon an Awakened Imperfect. So what you're effectively doing if you play this guy on turn 12 for 12 Magicka is get 2 8/8s, which is pretty good value. And you don't even have to have this guy be your Exalted creature. If you have another Exalted creature from an earlier turn when you play this, you get an 8/8 with Guard and Breakthrough. This card is very strong. The 3 Tribunal Temple Gods all have effects that trigger if you control other Exalted creatures. There's there is a good there is a deck out there that plays a ton of Exalted creatures. The tricolor guy that triggers all your Exalts again, and the 3 gods, and will do so very effectively. And it's going to look a lot different than any of the other kind of control decks, because I think that's effectively what it'll be. Any of the other control decks that we've seen before being so creature oriented. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. Sothasil is good in that deck. Sothasil is pretty good on her own and his own. I don't know if Sothasil is a man or a woman. And that's it for blue.